Hey, what's up guys? It's Marf and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be something a bit different because I wanted to talk about cloud gaming because recently Microsoft opened up their xCloud game streaming service to Game Pass subscribers for anyone basically with a browser. And so I got a nice 3-month subscription for $1 for this summer, and I figured I would play some games, and it was awesome because I had EA Play, so I played Need for Speed. But then they opened up this game streaming service and I decided to try it out. So please excuse the terrible driving quality and image quality. I'll explain why that is in a second, but let me just explain what cloud gaming is first of all. Now, in terms of the Microsoft xCloud service, essentially what it is over in some server room or wherever it is, Microsoft has lined up basically a crap load of Xboxes where you connect to them through your browser like you would load up a YouTube video, and essentially you get to control this console using a controller or even touch input, and whatever feed is coming out of that Xbox is being streamed over the internet to your browser. So now that you know how this works, let me explain why the game looks bad and also why my driving is bad. And that's essentially because of two things in order to compromise in order to get that game feed onto your screen. And those two things are bitrate and latency. Now, in terms of bitrate, that is essentially how many ones and zeros go through the pipeline of your internet connection in order to display the video. Now, it's not the same thing as resolution. Resolution is just the amount of supported pixels that can be displayed through that stream or on your screen. The bitrate is how many are actually allowed to go through that pipeline per se. Of course, the bigger the pipeline, the more quality is displayed on your screen. And in order to get the latency down as low as possible, there has to be a compromise somewhere, and that compromise is the bitrate. Obviously, it's pretty low here. As you can see, there's some pixelating going on and a lot of compression happening in order to make that latency go down. The best way I can describe it, it's like watching a YouTube stream or a Twitch stream that isn't super high quality, because basically that's what it is. There's a video stream being fed through your device over an internet connection. And so that is one of the compromises that has to be made. And of course, the other compromise is latency, and that's simply due to the distance between your device and the server, and the quality of your internet connection and the quality of the connections that are bouncing around the internet, eventually going to Microsoft servers and back to your device. And that is just something that's super hard to control. Over time, I'm sure it can be worked on and optimized in order to get as low as possible. I mean, there was that whole thing about Google Stadia having negative latency, which I don't understand. But with xCloud, the latency is really, really bad. And I get it, this is a beta, and it's not something that I am going to critique in terms of like objectively, this is a thing that they shouldn't be working on. This is something that I think has a lot of potential, and the latency is just a result of what's being done here. But it is something that is noticeable and something that should be considered when you are considering whether or not game streaming is something you want to explore. And as you'll notice by the quality of my game footage and how bad my driving is, the latency is bad enough to where even driving a generic race in Forza and even driving to a race in the open world is extremely, extremely difficult, because by the time your car is turning one side, you're trying to control it going the other side, and it's like you're a whole steering wheel turn away, or at least in front of what the game is doing. By the time you're turning the wheel one way, the game is still on the other way, and it's kind of the weird way to explain things, but the latency is just bad because you have to compensate for that. And in terms of accurately driving a car, well, it just doesn't work. It'd be like if you're driving a car in real life, and when you turn the wheel, it takes like what, maybe half a second for the wheel to actually turn itself. So yeah, that's the best way I can describe it. It's not a pleasant feeling. Now, something very casual, maybe like a story-driven single-player experience that doesn't require a lot of quick reflexes or accuracy, you might be able to get used to this and even ignore it because your brain will just, it'll be adapted to it. And I found when I'm driving and I'm not really trying too hard to get used to it, I'm driving pretty slow, that is definitely the case, like it's not too bad. But when you're driving like in a race and you're trying to be accurate with your corners and avoiding cars, it just doesn't work out. It is frankly too bad of an experience to even be playable, in my opinion. The latency is really the only one thing that they need to get right in order to make game streaming a very viable thing. Because in terms of image quality, on my Wi-Fi connection, it honestly was not that bad. I took some screenshots using the photo mode, and they looked pretty decent. Like, it does look like you're running not only on a lower resolution and lower bit rate, but because of that, and combined with the fact that modern streaming and internet connections are pretty good at this point, the image quality itself is passable in my opinion. I'm sure over time, as internet gets upgraded and of course consoles get upgraded in terms of graphical fidelity, this can be solved pretty easily, and that's a pretty nice thing to know. But the image quality itself, like I said, was pretty passable, and I didn't mind that, you know, maybe you couldn't make out some of the detail, because otherwise it's not that bad. And really the main thing I want to talk about is the latency. That's really what makes this experience, you know, playable. And once they get that latency low enough, you can pretty much excuse the visual fidelity and have this be a playable experience. Now, the other thing I did want to talk about is audio. When the audio is streaming fine, it sounds fine. It does sound a bit low quality, like what I said. You're watching a YouTube video. It's not something that is being run on your device, and that's just the nature of it being over the internet. But at times where the connection gets spotty and the audio starts cutting in and out and is very scratchy, that also makes this a very unplayable experience because it almost hurts your ears. And so I'll keep this at a lower volume throughout the video, so it also doesn't hurt your guys' ears, but you might be able to hear that it goes in and out, it scratches, there are pops, and honestly, that is just, it's awful. That is just, when I play this, I usually tend to have it muted because I just can't stand the pops and the scratches. But really the only two main things that I'm concerned about for game streaming is audio and latency. Once those things are sorted out, I can certainly see this being a viable solution to playing on the go. And that's where I want to talk about how does it affect mobile gaming, because you're no longer rendering the game on your phone, you're just streaming it. And really this all depends on how good they can optimize game streaming over the internet connection that people have, because like I said, once the latency gets low enough, and I know I've said this so many times throughout this video, it really does become something that I can see people using instead of playing games natively on their phone. Because yes, while Asphalt, Real Racing, and all those types of games, you know, Modern Combat, while they're great games in and of themselves, of course, having a fully fledged AAA experience is most of the time going to be a better experience in general. I would rather play Battlefield 2042 than Call of Duty Mobile. It's just the way things are because of the power of the devices, not only in our hand, but also consoles on your desk or big old desktops on the floor. And so once that is sort of evened out to where you have the power of those big desktops, but you have the portability of your phone, there won't really be a reason to natively render your games anymore on the device you're playing it with. And frankly, you will just be able to play games wherever you want. So like I said, this really just depends on latency. For now, it's completely unusable. And, you know, if you want to give this a try, it's something that is really cool. Like when I first started to play this on my phone, I was like, wow, this is a really cool experience. I honestly would have never imagined, you know, that I would be able to play a AAA console game streaming over the internet. This is really cool. But then it sort of settles in and you get used to the visual fidelity, but then you start noticing how bad the latency is and you're like, wow, this is awful. I'm going to go back to playing my mobile game. If you're, you know, at the Starbucks or whatever, it certainly does take its toll on your brain. Like I started getting a headache after how bad the latency was. But let me know what you guys think about game streaming in the comment section down below. Have you tried it? How is it? What do you think of it? And I will see you guys later.